Welcome back, everyone, to the Pinedo Brothers Podcast. I'm JP.
I'm Peter.
Welcome back. We're so glad that we have you. Peter, we missed you last week.
Yep. My apologies. I've been around. Had to leave Texas, the land of the free.
Well, we hope that you're not suffering from your lack of freedom too much and the overbearing. Right. Can we say where you are in the confines of the federal government now?
Yes. Well, I moved to a new place, and I there's an alleyway, kind of a passageway coming from the transit over to where my place is, and I've taken to calling it Communist Way, because there's just all of this graffiti and like crazy sayings and slogans that are all like literally just communist and Marxist sayings and stuff, and I'm like, yep, this is DC.
Welcome to Washington, D.C., Texas boy. You now live in the Communist Republic of Washington, D.C.
And Washington is rolling in his grave.
Poor George Washington. Well, speaking of people rolling in their grave, that's a perfect segue for what our topic is today. We're talking... Well, our topic, I tell you, we're talking about Puritanism and our Puritan our Puritan founding fathers, so to speak, who came over on the Mayflower and whatnot and landed in New England, because this is our Thanksgiving Day special. The humorous part about it is now Thanksgiving has been really absorbed into like the whole Christmas type of time. So this really embarks upon where people are just partying. Thanksgiving starts off, people are eating, and then, you've got Advent, but people don't really celebrate Advent so much, and it's all just Christmas, which I don't actually think is a terrible thing. I think we want to get into that and kind of do counterpoint, because a lot of Catholics are like, oh, it's so terrible. Well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Let's not jump to conclusions so quickly. Just like how I think we found a lot of good out of Halloween and the whole practice of Halloween, I think we might be able to find some good about it. But the crazy thing is our Puritan founding fathers, who were remembering, the thanks that they gave at this time, this week with Thanksgiving, they hated Christmas. They outlawed Christmas. Like it was a crime to celebrate Christmas in any of the lands that the Puritans ruled. And so they would be completely rolling over in their grave.
Their special day begins the Christmas season.
Oh no!
No.
I do think that Puritans are given kind of a bad rap these days. There's a lot of bad that happened. Obviously, the Salem witch trials were a thing. I know that wasn't a good thing. I'm not going to try and defend that. But they were radical in wanting to live their faith. And that's something to be said. And they also managed to travel months, and then come to a completely new land and manage to survive. That's pretty impressive. That takes some real doing. And they were very dedicated to education. They made sure their kids knew how to read and write in this new land. They built schools. They founded Harvard University within a few years of starting their colony. So they get a bad rap, but I don't think that they deserve it. Tell me, what's your take on Puritans, though?
I mean, I think that you're right that they very industrious from a certain aspect, being willing to recognize being willing and having the integrity to cross an ocean in order to live out your faith as you feel called to live it out is very impressive. From my understanding of Puritans, which is not super expansive, I do know that they were pretty intolerant of any kind of other types of denominations and forms of Christianity. So, from a certain aspect, I guess you could say that makes sense, because they felt like this is the one true calling of Christianity. But you would think that the people that had to flee persecution would have a little bit of understanding to not persecute other, denominations. But that's something I think that you saw in all of the colonies, that each one would found their own denomination of Christianity and not tolerate any other one, that even though they were all fleeing from oppression in England. But yeah, I think that people today, oftentimes we'll just kind of group them together with all, the colonizers, the group, that big, huge group of evil white colonizers that come over from Europe. I think I saw today, I think there was like some kind of FIFA official or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, Europe should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years for what we did. I was like,
if you listen to that quote, though, he was like, today I feel gay. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel like a woman. It's just like, whoa, okay, guys. How is this not offensive? Sometimes I just have to shake my head like, okay, how is all this wokeness not offensive? It's actually an inverse relationship between how, like, you speak about how are the Puritans not, like, they come to this new land with wanting to be able to practice their religion freely. And what do they do in this new land is they don't let people practice their religion freely. It's that same sort of inverse relationship. And really what I want to try and dive into is I've heard the argument that Puritanism, or let me back up. I've heard that wokism, that what we kind of classify as woke, the wokists now, is really a descendant of Puritanism. And we're seeing it manifest itself in this sort of dictatorial, like, just iron fist that's upon any, that just crunches down on anything that is not of the elect, not of the predestined, which is exactly the same type of mentality that we see in our Puritan forefathers. So I kind of want to analyze that and think about that with you in this podcast as a part of our kicking off of this holiday season. Maybe we finish up with saying a little bit about how, well, is it good or is it bad with like this extended holiday season that we have that ends now with Christmas Day, which is great for us Catholics because, if we actually live our faith, we know things don't end. The celebration doesn't end on Christmas Day. So this is really for us a beginning of, 2 months of a sort of festive season. Although, of course, in Advent, we're not really going at it as hard as we're going to go at it later on. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. We can talk about that at the end. What do you think? That's a lot to pack in. Maybe we get to a mailbag at the end and speak about some great comments that we had. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, sounds good. That's
okay,
good.
Great. Well, starting off on that idea, what do you make of okay, first of all, we should define what wokeism is. We refer to it as wokism. What do other people refer to it as? And what do we mean when we say wokism? I think we have a pretty clear idea of what it means to be puritanical, but let's define that as well. But I think it's easier to start about the closer thing, the thing that we see that's in much more in front of our face. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that when you think of wokeism, what at least comes to mind for me is very much a rejection of any other type of opinion, right? That I think that the term woke does come from that you're awake, your eyes are opened so you can see the world as it truly is, as this, as someone who is woke would say. And I know it's really come to be used, I think, as a derogatory term by like people more on the right, is like, oh, it's just another wokey or something like that. But the term woke, means to be awake, to be seeing the world as it is. And I think, of course, that is really very much a twisting of the world, or a twisting of reality, and seeing the world more not as it is, but as your ideology has twisted it to be. And it's like we've talked about it in the past, rejecting reality causes lots of problems, and ultimately I think leads to a lot of the mass depression that we have and suicide rates going up. Rejecting reality, you can only do that for so long, because eventually reality will hit you in the face. So I think that, yeah, it's kind of like it's seeing the world through a lens of ideology, and instead of experiencing the world as it is and helping that to form you as a person.
I think the way I internalize that is you have to have some sort of like secret knowledge. It's not secret as like Gnostic sort of gospels or something, but if you have that sort of knowledge that only a few people have, then you are one of the elect. You are one of those people that is actually of the saved. The salvation has come to you, and that's good. And there's good and there's bad in that. Mostly it's bad, but I don't want to just dismiss it immediately because, for example, I was having a conversation with someone who would definitely call himself one of the woke. It was an amicable conversation. And what I realized was that he was very dedicated to the idea of education. He was speaking about how he would love to make it so that everyone, he was a business owner. So everyone that works for him is able to send their kids to Harvard or Yale or an Ivy League school. Because, if you're able to get that great education, then you've got it. You've got your ticket to a good life. It's this idea, like once you have this great education, then you'll know right from wrong. You become become one of the elect. He spoke with people who had a good education, who've been, and by good education, he meant go to these fancy schools, then they're fit to rule. Like he even spoke about that. They're fit to run the state. And he even used the word deep state, with the actually not in a pejorative sense, like he was using it like, okay, this is what it is. And there are all these people from these great schools, and they know what they're talking about. They know how to rule, they know the good life. And there's a sense, I do appreciate Plato's idea of the philosopher king, the person who's been in the cave and now he's become, his eyes have been opened. He's seen the shadows and he's able to peer through, what is good and what is the bad. Now, obviously, I think most wokists would have trouble with saying, like, I think that there's a whole Pontius Pilate, and this comes from the postmodernist idea. Well, what is good? Pilate is the first postmodernist in that he says what is good. Which I love that character. If we could do a character study of Pontius Pilate, I think that would be a great TV show. Call it Pilate. But in any case, what you see that comes very directly, that idea, there's no, it's not an accident that the Puritans first founded Harvard, within the first few years of them coming here. And now the wokest, if you go to Harvard, that tells them that you know what you're talking about now, that you are one of the elect. And that's the same idea that the Puritans had, is that their children needed to have this great education. And then once they're able to know for themselves, read the Bible and be able to interpret it, internalize it, and become their own path conduit for interpreting this divine word, then they will be able to know and lead and be able to show that they are one of the elect. Because Puritanism is a splinter of Calvinism. And so Calvinism had that idea of predestination, where there are the goats and then there's the sheep. And if you're one of the goats, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're one of the goats. And then if you're one of the sheep, you should show how you are one of the sheep. That's something that was really driven in by the Puritans, is by the purity that you show in your faith, how you express it on a day-to-day basis. So you're not drunken or carousing like those Catholics do on Christmas. Oh, they hated Catholicism. So if you had that sort of this sense of your faith imbuing everything, which includes how you're able to study and interpret God's word, then it's showing how you're one of the elect. And that's exactly what you see now with the wokists, is if you have that sort of knowledge, then you're showing everyone that you are one of the elect. You're one of the woke. What do you make of that?
Well, my first question, I think, would be did either of these ideologies, Puritanism or wokism, do they accept like converts? If this idea of being a goat or a sheep, what I guess is the identifier of that, other than it, like that other religion or that other group, is they're the outcast, they're the infidel. Do either of these like accept people into their fold? Well,
let's analyze that for the wokist side, because I think the rules are being written in front of us. What do you make of it? I'm not sure about the wokists. What do you think? Do you think they accept converts?
I think my first thought is that they do, and I think I think that converts are accepted through, a groveling form of penance, for any past sins. And I don't know, I guess I'm not embedded enough or haven't paid enough attention to wokist culture to be able to say if they truly are eventually accepted. I know that, they do demand that people, grovel all the time. And
It's a type
many
of confession. Yeah, you have to confess. And then you have to make amends. You have to do penance.
Mm-hmm. And I know many people who consider themselves very woke end up, something that they said ends up being taken another way, and they end up having to grovel and apologize for that. And I think that lots of them are accepted back. So, but those are of course people who already identified as woke. So I don't know. I mean, what have you seen?
Well, my sense, and okay, I want to check myself here because I don't want to have what I think is the case explain. I don't want, my prescription, my diagnosis to actually influence how I'm reading all the symptoms here, right? Because I do think there's a propensity to that. So challenge me if you think it's wrong. My sense that I have about wokeism is that it's not a conversion as much as you're proving that you are one of the elect by doing these outward signs and these outward showings. So it's not a sense that, I have changed as much as I was always this way, and now I'm just showing you that I am this way. I think that's, you have to prove that you are one of the elect through all of these outward signs, but there's not a sense that someone can become one of the elect if they weren't already. There's that sense, well, they're lost. It's the deplorable. You don't ever rise above the deplorable if you're one of them. You're always going to be one of them. But what do you make of that? Am I pushing the narrative too much?
I mean, I think that one example that comes to mind, of course, is Elon Musk. Because he's traditionally been much more left-leaning, and I think that his ideology hasn't changed. I don't think his worldview has changed very much, in that he is still leans left, but he doesn't, I guess, bend to the will of what he sees as the mob. And so I think that shows proves what you're saying there, in that he, is more on the left. And then when these people come demanding that he, bend the knee to this ideology, if he doesn't, then it casts him out as not part of that group. It proves that you're not one of the elect because you are not willing to espouse all of this line of ideologies in the way that we want you to do it. Because I don't really consider him much of a person that's really on the right. He has I think some more right ideas now, because I think in many ways he's been pushed more towards the right, but he's still very center left, I would say. And so I think that was an example that comes to mind of them kind of fitting in that criteria that you put there. And what about Puritans though? Do you know if they ever accepted converts?
Well, my understanding, and this is why I need to check myself, is that it's you baptize, but it's already, you can be baptized into the Christian faith, but you are already one of the elect if you're baptized. It's a confirmation of that fact. So yes, in a way, but also no, because there's the predestined fact that existed already, and now it's just manifesting itself. That's my understanding. I think that would be a great question to study more, but I think that's very similar to what we see now. It explains kind of the metamorphosis that has kind of manifesting itself, because this is the Puritans. They multiplied like flies here in the United States. It's pretty amazing how it wasn't a ton of people that came, but they had a bunch of kids, and most of them survived a low death rate. And thanks be to God for that. This is a pretty amazing country. But you're still going to see the seeds of what these amazing people left, like, so the way that I've heard it said, and I'm curious to see what you think of this, is that the whole wokist adoration, and I use that word as specifically as I can, for the transgender movement is a simple next step in the whole Protestant Reformation. Just like the Puritan movement was a next step in the Protestant Reformation, so too is now an abandonment of Christianity and an adoration for this whole transgender movement is just a logical next step from that next step, which you see happening with Puritanism. But what do you make of that?
No, why is it the next step? I've never heard of it.
Well, this is not my idea. This is another Petersonian idea. So they can check it. People can check it out by listening to Peterson. But the way I internalize it very simply is that if you are to become, and remember how Puritans were, they were so interested in education because it allowed them to be able to interpret and internalize God's word, the divine word of the Bible, and lead them in their proper path. And so if, in other words, that allows you to become your own pope, it allows you to become the head of your own church and be able to lead that church properly in God's way, which is, of course, that's very close to the original Protestant Reformation, which is, well, no, we don't need this papist that rules us from afar. We're going to read the Bible on our own, and reading the Bible on our own is great. But if you throw away that whole connection to the papacy, there needs to be something that fills that void. And ultimately, when it comes down to it, it will be your own person that fills that void, who becomes the head of your own church. So if you become that same, if you create that similar reality, that if you fill that vacuum and you create your own rock upon which God has built, that and you are just that. There's no separation between you and God. God didn't build a rock on Peter or some sort of church hierarchy. He builds it upon you as the head of your church. Then it's just a next step from saying, okay, I am the church, to ultimately you have to deny the fact that there is something above you at all, because you create reality at that point. You create a sense of what is right and wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
A sole interpretation of right and wrong ultimately leads to you creating the meaning. Okay. So the idea then is, the next step is that you say, I am, just like the transgenders, I am what I say that I am.
Mm-hmm. I define reality.
And then you drop that. I am what I say that I am. So that's exactly what the transgender movement says. Drop out the what I say. You are now the I am what am. I am.
Mm.
You become God at that point.
Mm.
So it's just a logical next step in the chain where you create meaning you speak meaning out of your own words. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So I am what am is the transgender movement, which is just the next step from I am the rock.
Right. So it's kind of the progression of I am the supreme interpreter of the truth to I am the truth. Like it's a gradual progression over the years. I would agree with that. I mean, I don't think that I would go so far as to say that the Protestant Reformation led to the transgender. Like I think I would have to be have all the arguments a lot more hashed out in order to agree with that. But I think that I definitely think that, I mean, the Protestant Reformation, I think, is too broad as a historical occurrence, with all the different factors and varying ideas that went into it. I wouldn't say that it led to what we have today, but I could see definitely certain ideas that came from the Protestant Reformation really did lead, because the Protestant Reformation obviously didn't even happen on its, as a sudden, like, random event. It wasn't like just a sudden spark that happened. It was something that also built up, and there were gradual steps that led up to it as well. So there's all these ideas that preceded the Protestant Reformation that I think led to it. And I think maybe some of those ideas ultimately led to what you're saying right here about that idea of I am the supreme seer and understander of truth to I am the truth. Yeah. So I would definitely agree on that aspect.
Well, it was interesting. I was reading some Hilary Belloc last night, and he had a great point in which he said, now whenever there's any type of rebellion, you always see three parties in the rebellion. You see those that wish they see problems in the system, and they wish to wholeheartedly fix the problems, but keep the system. And sometimes their solutions are insane, and they cause way more trouble than the problem that they're seeing. So there's one group. And then there's the conservative group that rises in opposition to these reformers. The conservatives they see the danger of these sometimes problematic solutions. Sometimes they're good solutions, and they're acting in their own selfish self-interests, but they see danger in this somehow, and they resist the change, so that they're trying to preserve the system in which they have a very vested interest, which they've realized they have this vested interest. So those are the two parties. But then there's a third party, and the third party just wants to tear it all down. He's the Michael Caine. Some people just want to watch the world burn. So that is what we're seeing here. I think the ideology that's now transferred into this, morphed into this transgender movement, is the ideology that is, let's just tear it all down. And there were some of those people in the Protestant Reformation. I'm not saying all the Protestants wanted that, but there are that idea, and I think the Puritan idea is very, very closely allied to it because of their rejection of any type of hierarchy, ultimately, any type of ruling body above that one, the head of the household. And then that's varied, because, for example, the Puritans were very powerful in the English government for a while, until the monarchy reestablished itself. And that was when they all left and to come to the US, because the monarchy was something that they saw as anathema to their beliefs. So I think that what we see with this Protestant Reformation that's now led to the transgender movement, which is threatening to destroy our ability to actually understand, because the binary of man and woman is so deeply ingrained into our language. I mean, it's not as apparent in English, but something like Spanish, you can no longer speak if you do not have that male and female understanding of the world. You no longer can communicate. So that's why you have to destroy. That's why people hate Spanish so much, and they're trying to destroy it, and they have to say Latin now. I say it's more latrine, because that's what they think of us. Really, I feel like that's what they think of us when they're using that term as Hispanics. So I think that is kind of the genesis. That's who we see now. That's what we see now, is just the people that want to tear the system down, and that's what this whole transgender movement has led us to. What do you make of that?
So I think what really is coming to mind when you're saying that is that from a Catholic artist perspective too, I think that this ideology and this form of wokism, this evolution of wokism that manifests now in the transgender movement, is something. It is an idea and an ideology that destroys art, and it destroys really the joy of existence. Because there is a difference between art and parody, and I think that if you take the idea of a woman, right, a woman who enjoys femininity and loves, let's say, wearing, some elegant dress, and loves to wear makeup, that's not, if you're a woman, you don't have to wear makeup, but it may be a lot if you do enjoy it. And then you So that is something that is beautiful and can be very artistic, can wear an artistic dress and you can look very elegant. But then when you get somebody like the Dylan Mulvaney guy, who is a dude who dresses, in very old-fashioned kind of dresses and wears lots of makeup, that's not art, that's parody. It's parodying the truth and what is actually beautiful. And so I think that when you have this idea that now I define truth, you're taking the truth of reality and life and something that is meant to be beautiful, and you're twisting it to your own definition. And I think that really is the end of art and the end of beauty.
Absolutely. Well, artists have to recognize that we do not create meaning, like we realize when we create something, ultimately the best job we can do is someone projects the meaning, they and internalizes it into themselves, like we want to connect with someone through what we're striving so hard to do, but we have to recognize that we don't own this thing after it's done. And the only way that it survives is that it has a life outside of us that somehow managed to translate into this other person. It becomes a part of their interior estate. It captures their imagination, and then therefore by capturing it, it becomes their own. Mm-hmm. If you are dedicated to the idea that your word must be the word, and therefore you own the word, and it must be directly transmitted to other people, then your art is simply propaganda. It's the destruction all by itself. So, which your Dylan Mulvaney example here, which is really, it's tragic. It's stomach churning to see that, like that level. And I've been thinking so much about this with the whole elections where single women voted overwhelmingly for the party that espouses the transgender party. So, the Dylan Mulvaney, the party that affirms Dylan Mulvaney as a woman. And in case people don't know, I was so sickened by the videos that, and it's not like it's like highly gratuitous sex or anything like that. I'm not like, that would not be very sickening to me. There's a completely different problem that comes with that level of pornography. It's a man who's very obviously a man speaking in a falsetto voice and saying, I love the seasons. I love trees. I love bridges. I love dogs. I love puppy dogs, and he's speaking very childlike and just very effusive with his praise for these things, as if that sort of caricature of womanhood, it's not womanhood, really. He doesn't even call himself, I think he calls himself a girl. And so that caricature of, a young woman, a girl, is what makes him a female. So it was so stomach churning to see that. And so ultimately, when you get to that level of just total abandonment to ideology, where I am what I say that I am, which is, it's Luciferian in its epicness of total rejection of God. Like once you reach that level, there's no way you can create art. There's no way that you can do anything anymore, beyond make proclamations of fact. And it's tragic, because all these artists that are striving, that are incredibly talented to connect, no longer can. I mean, I was reading the news today about how the Disney CEO has to step down in disgrace because Disney is losing money hand over fist. And that's what happens, thanks be to God, when people can still choose that they want to consume actually art. Like there is that desire still that we're striving to find something that is objectively of interest to us. Proclamations of fact are really not that interesting. People are forced to have to listen to them ultimately. So thankfully, we're not at the state yet where people are forced to consume the proclamations of fact from our moral betters. What do we make of that long rant?
Well, I mean, I think what the question that comes to mind next is how Puritanism is tied into that. If I know that Puritanism, Puritans founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony, as well as a couple of other colonies, I think, and they were influential at the founding. So, how do you connect those dots right there that leads to today in its form of wokism?
Well, yeah, that's what I wanted to figure out quite a bit. The transgender thought was a little bit of a departure. I don't see beyond what I've said already, which is that dedication to the personal interpretation that the Puritans really refined, within the communities, and a total rejection of any type of hierarchy. I didn't have that beyond that a direct connection to puritanical beliefs, but I think what the most compelling connection is what we said already, which is that you must show that you are one of the elect. You have to you have to reject all else, like just as Catholics or Baptists or who are some of the others? Oh, the Quakers, even the Quakers, they would not be allowed in these Puritan settlements because they were not of the one true faith. So too are the Puritans. I called the wokes the Puritans because they really are. So too the wokes have to turn out anyone that is not of that one true faith. And in that, I see a real opportunity here. As Catholics are universal. So you can believe some really kooky stuff and be Catholic. You can believe that the earth is flat, actually, and be Catholic. I mean, I don't advise it, but you can believe things that are not true and you can still make it. So I think here as Catholics, and by make it, I mean, you can still have a life within the church, within the umbrella, the universal umbrella of the church. So as Catholics, and as artists, we have this great time where we can see, let's find what's good in our culture. And that's really what it's appeared to me since we started talking about Halloween, is how let's find what is good in our culture and let's see how can we turn that. Like, how can we say, okay, where do we find what we like about Elon Musk that we can affirm and say, this is really good. And so when he gets thrown out by the wokes, because that's exactly what's going to be happening, is there's going to be people like Elon Musk and Bill Maher who we do not agree with. Like, we do not agree with these people, but we can let them live in our midst. We can actually appreciate that which they do really, really well. Elon Musk and Bill Maher do a lot of things really, really well. And we can allow that creation to happen, to influence our own creation and add to our greater societies at large. So I see this as a time of it's an interesting, I mean, everything could fall into total chaos and total disrepair at any moment. But at the same time, I think there's a real opportunity for an incredible Catholic society to grow up, because all these great artists, all these great creators, like Elon Musk, maybe he's not an artist, but he is a creator. So he's got that artistic spirit somewhere. All these great creators will no longer have a space in the puritanical society that's being set up right now. Mm-hmm. And so I see this, like, let's find what's good. Let's find what we like let's find, let's affirm that. Elon Musk actually is dedicated to free speech. Oh, Bill Maher is not okay with, a young man saying, or a grown man saying that he's a young girl. That there are things that people were like, hang on, I know that's not right. And that will get you thrown out of being one of the elect. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think that Catholicism it's truly, like you were saying, it's a joyful existence, being a Catholic, because it's the definition of Catholicism is universal, in that, my favorite, example of what you were saying is that, you can be a good practicing Catholic and you can believe in evolution, and you can also have a good practicing Catholic who believes in, the strict, 7-day creation. Yeah, the earth is 5,000 years old.
Right.
Kind of
10,000 years since the earth's been created. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't laugh at it. I don't think that there's, I don't laugh at people who think that the earth is flat. And I'm not saying those two things are the same thing. Like, I think let's hear out the arguments, and let's say one argument is better than the other, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that you're not a Catholic if you believe in evolution. It doesn't mean you're not a Catholic if you believe that the earth was created 10,000 years ago. Yeah, exactly. 100% agree.
Yeah. So there's this room for universalism, which is, it's not, and it's also not at the expense of truth, because the Catholic faith, it teaches very strongly the tenets of truth and faith that are necessary for your salvation. So it's not like it's a universalist kind of like, believe whatever you want and you can be part of our group as long as you don't, you do this, because that ends up, being very. Man.
We're not hippies. If people are watching this and wondering with the Catholic faith, it's like, it's not hippiness. Right.
I mean, I think that the big difference to me is that it's rooted in reality. You can't reject reality in the pursuit of just accepting everything and everyone, right. Because there is truth. And I think, the image that comes to mind is the crucifix. It's Jesus dies with his hands outstretched, accepting, embracing the world, but it's also what's keeping his hands outstretched, nailing him to a tree. That's reality that he's accepting, because those things are forcing his hands open, but he is also opened up his hands in order to be nailed to the cross. So I think that image to me really embodies what the Catholic faith is, because it's an outstretching to embrace the world, but also rooted deeply in truth.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, to sum all of this up, this is a great start to this joyful season, this Thanksgiving season where we remember all that is good and give thanks for it. And then we continue on with this celebratory season. Advent is a time of anticipation, but we have a lot of moments of celebration. Our Lady of Guadalupe coming up, there's so many great Marian feasts, great saints days, and that's something that continues all year round. So it's not like the Catholic faith is all, sunshine and roses. We have harsh times as well. I mean, the whole Holy Week is not the most fun time to be, party time, but it's not. Let's find, as our brothers and sisters around us are celebrating throughout these next few weeks, times to join in that celebration, because that is really what it is to be Catholic. We've always looked and found, like, that's why the Puritans throughout Christmas is really because Catholics borrowed that from other holidays, from other religions, this holy day from other religions, and we sanctified it. We found it as something, this is good, this is worthwhile. So let's turn that attention towards a glorification of God. Just as the transgender movement and other things of the wokist movement are blasphemous to our good Lord, so too are there things that are in a popular culture that are good moments where we can sanctify it and we can find great joy in it, like you were saying. So that's all a long way of saying that thank you to our Puritan forefathers who gave us this great holiday of Thanksgiving. I thoroughly enjoy it.
Yeah, but my question is, so are you okay with Christmas season starting on Thanksgiving? What do you think? What's your hot take?
Am I okay with the Christmas season? I'm okay with partying starting on Christmas. On Thanksgiving, I think what I would point at is that it's technically not the Christmas season, but it is the holiday season. And if someone wants to wish me happy holidays, sure. Holidays are holy days. These are holy days. The Advent season is a holy day, is a holy season, the holy season of Advent. So happy holidays is not, it's a blessing ultimately. Happy holy days is a blessing. So I see no reason for consternation when someone comes up to you during this time and says happy holidays. And I do think that technically it's not the Christmas season, but I don't think we have to go around correcting people about it. It is It is. It is. It is a good season. You know, we're anticipating the coming of our Lord and Savior. That's amazing. So why not be happy about that?
Yeah.
And I would say just continue on the celebrations in your own Catholic way once Christmas Day hits. And, you know, and join in with your brothers and sisters around you before the day hits. It's just, why not just have both? I don't see why you can't tell me. Can we not have both? Is that too much? Am I overly Oscar Wilde at this moment and falling into a trap of hedonism?
I think that
nothing succeeds like success. No, nothing succeeds like excess. Sorry, Oscar.
Yep. Well, I think that it's really good. Honestly, I think it's really good to participate in Christmas celebrations along with the rest of culture. But I think that as Catholics, we can have a deeper appreciation of Christmas and ultimately a greater partaking in the joy and festivities of Christmas by also not bypassing the kind of bypass. We don't want to bypass Advent because it's a mysterious and joyful season in its own right. And that's something that as Catholics, I think it's important to not forget about, to not, I don't want to be boycotting my friend's, Christmas party. But I also want to be conscious of this season that's going through, because it ultimately, I think that, to me at least, it gives me a greater sense of joy and appreciation when Christmas finally does come. Right. It's the same thing, kind of the same idea as Lent. As Catholics, we have 40 days of Lent, which is, we kind of take it as Jesus going into the desert and praying and fasting in the desert to grow closer to God. And that's a season that, obviously secular culture there's no such thing as Lent. And that's why I think that there's, Easter has kind of lost a lot of its grandeur in the eyes of the secular world, because there is no Lent. So if there's no Lent, how can there be any Easter? And so I think both of those are examples of not forgetting those seasons and those times of growing closer to God, so that you can have a greater appreciation later on.
Right. Well, you can only find what is good about other value systems. Because I want to be careful, because even though it is a type of faith that people practice, getting out of bed in the morning is an exercise in a certain type of faith. So even that small insignificant step is indicative of some sort of interior state that you have, and some sort of interior faith that you have. So when we're looking about ourselves and we're seeing other practices or other belief systems that even don't call themselves faiths, ultimately they are faiths. So I guess I'll embrace the word now that I've explained it. When we're looking at other faiths, we can only appreciate them, that which is good. I mean, if we know our own. So if we override our season of Advent because we don't understand it, then ultimately we can do no good to anyone. We're just like the people, the salt that's lost its flavor, that's no good anymore and needs to be thrown out into the highways. So we need to retain our flavor, and that will allow us to appreciate that which is good about other faiths that are around us. So absolutely, I agree with what you're saying. And I think what we could do is kick off, this hopefully is a good kickoff for the Advent season that's coming this Sunday. And over these next few weeks, hopefully dive into this understanding of the Advent season and an appreciation for this Christmas time that is to come, because I think we might take a break over Christmas. So, yes, what do you think of that?
I agree. Absolutely.
Great. Okay. Well, should we pause here? I wanted to get to the mailbag.
Yes, let's hear.
Okay. We had a great comment that I promised to read on our podcast. So let's see. Nathaniel and Jamie say, honestly, I've never been, and this is in response to our Frankenstein video, I've never been a fan of Frankenstein, but I have a couple of thoughts, not least of which being you all are the first to convince me to perhaps look into this classic. So throughout my occasional moments of dwelling on this story in my life, I have come to the conclusion that Frankenstein and the monster are one and the same. a veritable Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And more recently, I feel I have been affirmed in this interpretation by Dr. J.B. Peterson's, one of my favorite lines of his, directed particularly towards young men: become a monster. Monster is bolded, and then learn to control it. This is, in my intuition, a fairly Catholic sentiment, though I cannot confirm this theologically, in that we are born into this world with the monstrous root of original sin, and we are called in our lives to grow in virtue and curb our natural tendencies towards evil. Feel free to pick this apart, though. As I've already admitted, I'm not a great fan of the original topic and not spent a great energy to solidify this theory. All right. Well, Nathaniel and Jamie, thank you for that great comment. Peter,
Thank you.
do you want to kick off some thoughts? Because I do have a few, but I want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I think you're really right, Nathaniel and Jamie, about the monster being really a reflection of Dr. Frankenstein, because he, like creates like. He created really a man in his own image, and that is what I think really horrified him when he first gave life to this creature, and he looked at the monster, and immediately he knew something was wrong. He knew he was horrified by it. He felt it deeply inside of him. I think that was because he saw himself in this creature. He saw a twisted version of himself with it, and the most monstrous part of him there as a living being. So I definitely think that that's something that Mary Shelley was speaking to, and that without this unbridled like hubris, and obviously that's kind of a big point in this story of no regard, kind of how they say in that guy who comes out of the curtain, he goes, no regard for God. That's what you get. That's what happens.
Well, okay. So much to love about this comment. The first thing I would say is, I love that they brought up Jordan B. Peterson, the great and good Dr. Peterson, because he is something of a Jungian and a Freudian combined, which is supposed to be a contradiction, I hear. I'm not enough of an expert to know it, but they both agree in the interpretation of dreams. And I think the key to understanding Frankenstein, and this is something I realized, when we wrote this episode, I admitted I still had the last volume of Frankenstein to read. And when I read that last volume, it occurred to me, I think, what the key is for understanding this story and understanding who the monster is, because we were struggling about that. Mary Shelley had a dream, and that's what gave her this idea. I think I meant to mention that in the story. She was living with a man when she had this dream, who she called her husband, but who was married to another woman, and who she took away from that other woman. And that other woman went on to commit suicide from the grief of losing her husband. And then, of course, they were married after that because they were allowed to. And this woman, Mary Shelley, even though she was writing and she was saying how blissfully happy she was brought up religiously. She had an appreciation for the contract, the sacred contract of marriage, that she must have subconsciously known she had violated this contract. And even though she's speaking about how happy she is, she has this terrible dream of a terrible monster. And the story is all a realization, an interpretation that's just been thrown onto paper of that. She says she was just possessed by this idea of this monster that she saw crouching by her bedside. And I think if you take these little disparate facts, that she's brought up religious, she respects the institution of marriage enough to actually get married, so if she didn't respect the institution of marriage, then she wouldn't have entered in that contract, so there's obviously some sort of respect for the contract that she just voided. by taking this man away. So, and then she says she's happy. So she's repressing some sort of underlying guilt, that because she hasn't faced it. She's just saying, she's writing, in her diary about how happy she is in these blissful, carefree times. The monster has to be, for this woman, a projection of her sin that she's taken on, that she by making this, by avoiding this contract and taking this man as her own. And this sin, even though it had all the I want to start out on this beautiful path, I want to create this new life, I want to create this beautiful, this pursuit of something great and grand and that's beautiful. That idea just becomes twisted. It manifests itself with this ugly face, and you see the face and you realize this is not good. I have gone off the path. And that's what she's realizing in her own life. And it's funny because she wrote this story before all this terrible, like her children died miserable death. Her husband, Percy Shelley, died a miserable death, like they're just drowned. So all of these, and her children all died very young, as infants generally. So she's foreshadowing, she's speaking prophetically at this point. She's foreshadowing this great sadness that's going to be manifesting itself through this union that she had with this man. And it's tragic. It's an incredible tragedy. But ultimately, the monster, I believe, is a manifestation of her interior state, of her guilt that she's pushed away, that now becomes manifest in her incredible talent. Her gift as an artist exposes this. So really, ultimately, the monster is sin. And it's, I think, very particularly a sin of stealing another woman's husband away.
Mm-hmm.
What do you make of that?
I mean, I think you put it very beautiful, that it's a creation of life at the same time as a destruction of life. She destroyed life by taking this man, and obviously he had a role in that as well. And his first wife is brought to suicide, and that's a destruction of life. But it's in a pursuit of building a life, right? That blissful happiness that she was in, and that marriage that ensued afterwards, and the children that ensued afterwards. And it's just really, it's a true tragedy in that destruction, what begins in destruction ends in destruction. Right? The destruction of the life of that first wife, and the end of the life of her children, and the sorrow that comes after that. And I think that she was a true artist, that she was able to convey that idea and that sense and that guilt into something that we know and is very powerful and pervasive in society today. It's a story that we all know.
I'm glad that struck a chord with you. That's gratifying to me. I think we're probably out of time, so we could talk a lot more about it, but I did want to mention very briefly that I 100% agree that it's a Catholic idea to become a monster and then learn to control it. Mm-hmm. Peterson has a lot of Catholic ideas, but not saying that he's a Catholic. I'm just saying that, he does. And I think he would agree with that. That is a very old Catholic idea. Well, the first that I remember hearing about it was when the missionaries were going out to convert all of the European hordes. And this was something that my great professor, who you can see was a guest, I'm so amazed that he was a guest in our podcast, Dr. Dimitrovic, would talk to me about back at Sam Houston State University. These missionaries are going out to convert the European hordes, the barbarians, incredibly violent cultures. And how do they manage to convert these incredibly violent tribes that are roaming Europe, just destroying everything? They say, you can, if you join this faith, you can use that violence just as much as you do now. You can just turn it and you'll be attacking sin. And then you become even more violent, but you are also good. Mm-hmm. And there was appeal in that you can take this violence that you have inside of you and actually make it a force that is good, because you can see if you're just killing everyone around you, you're not really building much. But if you attack sin, then you have an ability to build. You can make these great cultures, and maybe your family is a little bit safer. So
there's a true freedom, I think, in conquering yourself.
Yes, absolutely. So it's an incredibly Catholic idea. And I think that it's one that is a perfect message for right now, where we're told that men are disposable. The whole masculine idea is not necessary anymore. Well, guess what? You need violence. You need us. We're the ones who makes large systems work and run, and we chart courses through unknown waters, and we are crazy enough to colonize Mars and create a land where there was none, create a civilization that is capable of putting someone on the moon and on Mars out of nothing, where there was no civilization. And you can say there was, the Native American tribes. That's true. The Native Americans weren't about to build spaceships. I mean, they weren't about to build ships that could cross oceans at all. So there wasn't a great civilization that could dream of something this enormous. And so if you dedicate yourself to be a monster and use that for good, there's no telling what you can create. So it is a perfect time to be hearing that message that old Jordan Peterson has. And it is very Catholic.
Yes, sir.
Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I love it. I love the idea of taking the war campaign to your own self, an inward campaign to conquer yourself, and to use that passion inside of you to build instead of destroy. But it's a similar type of violence that it takes to build something as it does to destroy something. And oftentimes you do have to destroy something to build something. But it's for and it's something that can't be erased and it can't be ignored. And I think that's an incredible message of hope to men across the world who are really being told that there is no place for them.
Right.
So thank you for that.
And I think also there's a purity of objective as well. You're not going to do much if your first task is to tear something down. You're probably not. If your first step along the way is to destroy something, then you're probably not going to make it. You just ask those barbarian hordes. They weren't doing much in Europe. There was not much being erected. But once you can, master your violence, then you have the ability to build something. And maybe in building structures, other structures fall, but that's not your objective. You don't go out trying to burn other things down. I think that's an important message for right now. That could temper, people's propensity to attack. Yeah. Okay. Well, shall we leave it there for now?
I think so. I mean, This has been really good. And thanks for the comment, Nathaniel and Jamie.
Yes.
Appreciate you on the show.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I guess we will leave it there for now. Peter, thank you. I'm glad that you're back. I'm looking forward to doing this Advent season with you.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Great. All right, everyone. For Peter and JP, we are the Pinedo Brothers, Catholic filmmaking brothers, working to revitalize the world of Catholic art through film. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Pinedo Brothers Podcast, an artist podcast for Catholics. We hope you enjoyed it. And if so, please consider subscribing, and commenting below. That really helps. This episode was edited and recorded by me, JP. Makeup was done by no one, if you couldn't tell. For more information on us, check us out at pinedobrothers.com. Thanks again.